The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone who is online and listening to us. Today, we are going to present you a really interesting and fascinating project. Some of you might have been on this year's ISE in Amsterdam, a really big trade show, where we had a very special exhibit. We were showing a Carrera racetrack with widget analysis. And today, Thomas is going to talk about how exactly he did it.
Yeah, thank you, Janina. I will try to. Yeah. Should we directly dive in?
Yes, go on, start.
Okay, cool. My PowerPoint is, now it's moving. So what is the webinar content? So we will look into the manager application, Pandora's Box manager application, of course, and we will have a look at the mapping and the tracking, the info screens, what is around for informations, live cams and mini projectors. We will have a look at Racetrack Sequence, SlideShow Sequence, live cam sequence, so all the sequences. There are some more. I don't dive in too much into that. We'll see, and you always are welcome to put some questions in, of course. And heading on with the two widget applications, that's the percent of the setup. The tracking widget with controls, nodes, scripts, and variables, and the registration widget, how the registration is working, how the photos are working, variables and database. And finally, we will have some workflow analysis, and as a timely matter, we may have a little questionnaire about which direction we go there, but we'll see when we hit that point. Yeah, that's it about the contents.
Okay, then let's take a look at the setup and what the project actually was.
Yes. So there's a little video. The video is not very good to transmit via GoToWebinar though. So I will just sneak through some points here. So the first thing to show is maybe the tracking. As you can see, maybe you can see there's a little car moving around, automatically driven by the Carrera track, and it's getting a nice particle a particle light following the car. So we did that with two cameras mounted at the ceiling, tracking the car. So the car, all the cars have an ID tag built into the car. So that was made by ourselves. And yeah, so cars are tracked, and there are different possibilities to use that tracking data. For the pace car, this was just the following light when it makes it rounds. If I try to push it once, maybe you can see it a bit. Yeah, that's the track.
So the ID tags, they were obviously driven by batteries. How long did those batteries last? When did you change them?
I changed them every day. Possibly they can make it 2 days, but to be safe, we just changed it every day.
That's pretty long. One of those show days was about 8 hours, was it?
Yes, and some preparation, and sometimes it was a bit longer with the beer and making some more rounds, and yeah. So it was okay for the battery lifetime. Yes. So next, what's the next point to go to?
We could see a couple of screens. Exactly those. What exactly are those?
So yeah, we have two screens, or two kind of simulated screens here, and some real mini projectors built in that building here, and on the other side too here. So there's also, can we see that somehow? Yes. So there's a building and a projector in that building projecting on this screen and over there too. And this is fed by 3 live cams. They are not really visible here, so there you can see one of them. So there are 3 of those cameras around the table, and the tracking system is also used to switch those cameras to follow a certain car. So when the pace car goes around, it will hit some non-visual boxes here for the tracking system, and if you hit that box, this camera will be turned on the screen. So the car moves on, passing that camera, hitting the next box, and this camera then will be shown on those screens. And a little ticker at the bottom which displays the 10 best times.
Okay, that is pretty cool. How did you start the races?
Oh, there is, let me, there you can see this big red button there. So this button initiates the start of a race. So when every participant is holding the controller for the car, you hit that button and this will start the race. So there's a communication from the widget. Of course, this button is plugged to the widget via fidget devices, and when the button is pressed, it will give the command to start a race in the Carrera track.
Ah, that is pretty cool. What we also did is a pretty awesome competition. So we registered all the users that were using the Carrera track, and we were actually awarding something, which is a widget license, was it?
Yeah.
And the registration system was not connected to the general app thingy where you could just scan someone's badge. What was that?
Yeah, so we were not allowed to use that. Make it maybe difficult though. So we had to do a manual registration. So we had a widget on a tablet. It was a Surface tablet. I used the Windows system to have better connection and communication possibilities to our Pandora's Box system, to share pictures and things like that. So this was the main goal was to collect user data, of course, and so that's what we need the registration for, and we have to put the times for each participant to a unique name, of course, so to know who is the winner and to call him in the end of the day, and yeah, to be sure who is set the best time. That's about the
Okay.
registration.
I think that's a good general overview.
Yeah.
Let's take a look at the mapping first.
Yeah, or the setup in whole. So what did we use for computers? So there's the first thing here already. We use a dual server for 2 Christie 1920 by 1200 resolution projectors to map the table. So it's a soft edge setup. So there's the soft edge was kind of the size of this lake here in this example for the texture. So we used that texture, made some warpings to adjust it correctly and to fit it on the table. After that, we added the track itself because it had to be really precise, because there were also some logos inside and things like that. So everything was warped, singular, and to really match to really match it very well. That it looks pretty, right? And then we added some masks here for these buildings which are on the table to not break the texture there. And instead we added some track information. So
that is cool. So the projection mapping enables you to use different maps as well.
yes, we did so. So every initialization, every start of a race changed the mapping. So we had, I think, 6 or 7 different textures. So we decided to put one race in Germany, next in France, and so on. So we had different textures, so we switched them every race, which gives a new look on something there. Well, and finally we added also some starting lights. So if the participants concentrate on the start here, we added some lights here to initiate the race start. And that was it about the mapping and the dual server. That was its only purpose, to project these information.
Very cool. So the next thing that we had was all the info screens around, where we had the results. Yeah, exactly that one.
That's not the result screen, that's the advert screen, let's say. So how does it work? So it was a bit of explanation that you have to register and what you can win and things like that. We will look into that a bit deeper later. That's just for an overview. So we use the quad server, 2 of those outputs, outputting UHD resolution, and one was doing that side, and at the back of this monitor there was a second monitor, and this one was doing a live leaderboard and timings and also starting lights. So if the race is initiated, it changed to starting lights and had some huge start information so everybody can follow very good.
Okay, and the last thing, those little screens on the track, they were also fed by Pandora's box, right?
That's correct. So the other 2 outputs of the quad server, they were connected to these 2 little projectors on the table with the small resolution 1280 by 800, and yeah, also driven by this quad server. So the information on these little screens is the live picture, of course, and it followed the car and the leaderboard, which was a ticker or a scrolling text at the bottom of that screen. Yeah, that's about the setup, and we used to make this happen. We of course used multiple sequences in the Pandora's Box Manager, where those 2 clients, so the dual server and the quad server, were connected to, and that's just an overview of the different sequences. So the first sequence was used to have all the setup, so there were all the output information stored, the warps, mainly the warps, of course, but also the soft edge settings and things like that. So you can always turn it on and off independent from whatever you have as show running. Second sequence is for the live cams. So we'll dive into those later. Also the racetrack sequence, that's the main sequence for the live leaderboard on one of those UHD screens. The SlideShow is the other UHD screen, and these 4 are, there's not much happening now. This is just an add-on for this sequence here. So these were just used to, these were just triggered if there was a best time set by one of those cars to make it a bit fancy on the live leaderboard. So there was a zooming effect on the timings. That's about the sequences.
When we had a little particle animation when one of the cars crashed and it was flames. On which sequence did that run?
This is not run by a sequence directly, more or less. So there were some settings, of course, stored on the sequence. Let me think about that. I think it should be on this one. We will dive into that one. It has to be on that one. We'll have a look at that later. I think it's the racetrack thing.
Okay, great. Then let's take a closer look at the different sequences.
Sure.
How about the live cams? Yes, that one.
Yeah, the live cams, that setup is like we have all these 3 live cam feeds here, and they are always visible, more or less, or always enabled, let's say that way. And the widget designer is driving the opacity for these 3 layers. So the widget designer decides which one is actually shown, and this has nothing to do with the now pointer's position. So the only thing the now pointer is doing is these text things here. So this is the scrolling ticker at the bottom of those screens, and these text inputs from Pandora's box, they are also updated by the widget designer to the actual leaderboard. So this is the names of the leaderboard, and of course the timings for this participant, and these are displayed there and scrolling at the bottom. That's the purpose of that sequence. And yeah, that's a little view for the output. So you can see the warp a bit, and this is the car which is followed. So also this is displayed. I think that's this resource here. So this is also updated, which car is currently followed on screen. The live pip is not visible here because it's the manager view. And yeah, at the bottom there's the ticker.
Okay, cool. The next thing was the info screen, I guess.
Yes, or I call it SlideShow Sequence. So the slideshow, we had 6 different slides to show there, with just a little information about how it works and so on. And in between, we had also a live leaderboard. So also again, 10 names and times to be displayed there, but accurate to the actual state of the race. So if one race has finished, these timings were updated. So how does that work? There's again a loop there. So this was also looping and just playing these single slides for a certain time, I think about 15 seconds or something like that. And the playlist here is a little logo. It's not, I haven't put it in here. So there's a logo so the Christie Pandora's box logo popping up there in different kinds. So that's why there is a playlist in there. And this section here, this is when this leaderboard comes up to have the names, which are mainly the same as we used before in the sequence, in the live cam sequence here. So these were used again to display the names on the leaderboard here.
Okay, so what remains is the main racetrack sequence.
Yes.
Which is really beautiful and colorful, and I cannot emphasize enough how important it is to color your layers.
Yes, I also thank you for that. I also like to give, so if I use one color, I give it a little shape here. So one is a bit lighter, one is a bit darker to be exact on the lines. If I have that many, for example, it's not necessary you do that, but it's a good overview. So as you can see here, those colors, there's nothing on. So these layers were used on a different sequence. These four sequence. This is what I mentioned before. The four sequences. Let's skip back to that. So this is red, green, yellow, and Christie. So these are here: red, green, yellow, and Christie. There's just a little effect for setting a best lap time. So what is happening here? This sequence was not used to play, so it just has different states. Yeah, so this was just driven by go to that queue, go to that queue, or wherever it has to go, depending on the state. So no playback here, just jumping to queues. How is it working? What you can see here is mainly the live leaderboard. So that was pointing to the racetrack. So participants and audience all can directly see when someone finished a round, sets what time was that round, is it a best lap time, or something like that. And always displayed is the leading times of the day and the track record also. Maybe you'll see this line here. This was the indicator for the race time. So the race had a certain time. I think it was 1 minute, was it? I think
so too, but I'm not sure.
I think it was 1 minute. So this bar filled up in 1 minute, and when it reaches the right side, the race was over. And this was indicated by I forgot to mention that. I can do now by a big red light which goes over the whole screen, and also some text I think which says race over, so projected on the table. So this is what these are for, and what we have here is, well, all the labels, all the text inputs from Pandora's box here, which are updated very quickly. So as soon as a car crosses the finish line, this will initiate an update on these values here. So as you can see, there's the name of the participant. It was able to race with three people. So there you can maybe imagine just 2 more lines in between here for more participants. And there was a Christie car, so all the Christie members were allowed only to drive that car to not influence the best times here. Yeah, so this was while the race was going on. This is the screen with those timings. Also after finishing the race, this was the screen. And of course there are different states of race. So if you hit the red button, when you hit the start race button on the registration widget to get new registered people into the race, the racetrack will change to the start formation or grid formation state, and then we displayed that screen here. So we had big images of the people. Also here were also images I can remember, but smaller. I don't know why I missed them there. So we had the names, huge letters, and the pictures, so everybody knows which car to drive and which controller to use. right? So I remember there were the photos. So, and this is the setup they have to use. That's why there's no photo for that. Okay. However, so people do know what gear they have to use, and when everybody's set up, you can hit the red button, and this will initiate the start. And for the start, I can read that out of the track, the different states. So we had 4 red states, and the next state was then green for start the race. And then
and the race would start.
And
awesome.
Of course the timeline, so I forgot to mention that. So when I switch to that state, I jump to this queue here. So this will then display the controller things, and it will also change, as you can see here, the position and this the scaling of these inputs here, and also the photos, which are unfortunately not visible here. So this will change the size and the positioning of these elements. And hitting the red button, initiating the starting grid, the sequence will jump to that queue here. So you lose all these informations here, and you're just showing that these lights. And this is the state all off, 1 on, 2 on, 3, 4, 5 on, and green. And this is the only part which was played back, I think. So it played it for some seconds, and then it jumped back to that state, or was it that one? I can't remember properly. So it jumped back to that to display the leaderboard again. Yeah, I think that's all about the racetrack sequence.
Which brings us to the probably most important and interesting topic. How exactly did you get all the data from the racetrack to Widget Designer and between other components?
And that's the main question and the main goal for this webinar. Thank you. All right, so as I said before, we used 2 widgets for that setup. Both were running, by the way. We're speaking about setup on different devices, to spare a bit performance, because I wanted to have that tracking widget the most performant as possible to be very accurate on timings, because the Carrera track can be very, so the gaps between times can be very tiny, so I wanted to be very exact on that. So make sure the performance is high on this machine, which is doing all the tracking and reading the Carrera track. So the tracking widget, of course, is doing the tracking, and it's reading the Carrera track, and it's also plugged to the red button and the RFID fidget, thanks, that was it, to change the camera settings. So there were just two pages there. The first page is about checking the key variables. If everything is running okay, we were able to set the race time. We didn't use that though, but after we finished racing for the hot timing, and yeah, this was able to because Widget Designer can provide it on the Ethernet and on an HTML browser. I was able to use just the control, which is then connected to that Wi-Fi, to have instant access to these key features here, like stopping the communication or restarting the communication in case something happened. It went very stable though. I was really impressed how stable it worked. Yeah, just race time, direct access to key variables. I think I hit all of those, and of course, all the connections there.
You did, but there's also a quite impressive node system behind it.
Oh yeah, there is. Yeah, the second page there is where all the communication happens and the processing of the tracking values. That's all happening here. So you can see this is the communication to the cameras and getting the values out of the cameras. So getting all the ID tag position data for all ID tags, they're coming out of this node. And then I did again a nice color thing here, so you can recognize it very good. So this is the processing of the data for the red car, for the green car, the yellow car, the Christie car, and the pace car. So this is, for example, just to have these following particles. I just used the incoming X and Y information. I set it into a range. So this is a range node there to adjust it to my resolution of the table. So my double soft edge resolution. And yeah, I put the particles on that to follow that ID tag, for example. So there's some more features in here. So here's all the communication to the Carrera track. So this is reading the incoming messages from the Carrera track. And of course, there's some communication to the RFID chip. This is done via widgets, and the red button. This is connected here to have these triggers available in my node processing system. And finally, the communication to Pandora's box to set the actual timings, or the final best times, I think it only was. And of course communicate with the registration widget to share information about who is participating and what's his timing. Did he race already or not? What was his timing? Is it a new timing set? New timings? Things like that have to be considered when you go into that database driven thing. Yeah, so that's the communication part of the tracking widget.
And the second widget that we had for the registration, right? That was on a different PC, but displayed on a Microsoft Surface, right?
This is correct. So this widget was running on Compact Player, I think, yes. And a Surface tablet was connected via Wi-Fi. And you were able to put in a nickname. This had to be unique, so I made sure did some scripting to make sure this is a unique name and it has at least three letters. Then we had the main information, and we didn't use that at all, I think. So address, postcode, and country. I don't know if somebody put that in there. And of course, you were able to take a photo and use that photo also inside Pandora's box, and that needed some processing there, how to get the photo, because it's not if you do not run the widget directly on a device, you have to figure out how you get the photos from the Surface tablet. So we switched to the camera application there, which was not providing many options to send that photo file to somewhere. So that's a very basic application there. So I was only able to store it locally. So I made the widget look for that folder and loaded the photo into the widget. And I was also not able to change the format for those photos, and they were much too huge. So I didn't want to use these huge photos and always wait 1 or 2 seconds for each photo to appear on Pandora's box. So I decided, and thanks to Janina who came with this great idea, thank you again, to just take a screenshot out of the widget. So I loaded that into a picture box, and you were able to shift that frame around. And with this frame, you also shifted the screenshot area, and pressing this button then took a screenshot from that area, and this picture of this screenshot area was then taken into the database of Pandora's box, and this was then to be displayed on screen. Yes, and after finishing all these registration, you push that register button, and this automatically put the new registrant to the race queue or the next race here. And this was the main button. If you hit that button, this will, first thing, it will send all these names to the actual races. No, these ones, sorry. So these are the actual races. So this, when the race was ready, so this was another variable you had to share. Is the race still going on? Then you cannot use this button. But when the race has finished and you push that button, the next queue was pushed to the current race, and this information was shared with Pandora's box and the tracking widget, and also if there were already existing timings and that, all these informations were shared. And what this button also did was to set the racetrack into the grid mode. And of course, Pandora's box and everything what comes with it was then in grid mode, waiting for the red button to be pushed and start the race.
Mm-hmm. But you didn't always have to enter new registration information. You could just change or recall something, right?
Yeah, sure. That was another some days I put effort into that registration widget to make this database. So it was all about this database. So one JSON file which has everything in it, all the information for every registrant. So you can there were some pages available on this widget, and the edit driver section, you were able to edit profiles. So you were able to search the database, also search for categories, and then you can choose the name you want to edit, and then it all was written back again into these input boxes. You can edit it and then update those things. Happen from time to time because some people, they are about their data, so they put in wrong data and then they did it best time, and then they thought, maybe I give my correct data so Christie can phone me to get me the jacket I win, something like that. So that happened from time to time. So you also were able to change the photo or something like that. So all these information were editable. That was also the reason for us not to give that tablet out of hands, so that people do not edit somebody else's things, right?
Mm-hmm. Indeed.
Yeah, so the short about the config, there's not much in the config screen. This is there are some nodes which process, for example, this drop-down box. So there's a script what happens if I push something on that drop-down box, start the communication with the other widgets and things like that, and getting information from the other widget back into the system here. Now, what these nodes are for, and finally the watch folder option to process the images from the surface. That was it. about that.
That's cool. I just realized that I jumped over the scripting section of the last one. So let's check out the scripting from the registration and then go back to the tracking widget.
I like that. I like it. If we have to, let's have a look how much I can put in there. But yeah, for registration widget scripts, I just took some photos of the scripting area of the registration widget. So the programming is mainly based on macros and functions. So this is the main, or these are the key elements of this widget, right? So the node system is not much. Everything more or less is in these scripts here. So let's see, new race. This is a macro which is behind the button to start the race. This one here, and so there is the information. Push the data to current race. Let's and move everybody up. So if there is a queue in there, so there were always 3 participants able for next race and upcoming race. Behind that, because I didn't know how many people will register, behind there is a wait list. So all this wait list has to be updated and everybody has to be pushed forward, right? So that's behind that script here. This one, for example, write best time. This is the main thing to update best times into the database, for example. And what else do we have? Add driver. This is the registration part here, how this works. Yeah, we can dive into that deeper later, just to give you a quick overview over that section and talking about that. Have a short look on the variable list. So here, the driver list, this is the main, this is the main variable here, and this is, oh no, this driver data, sorry, I don't have to click there. The driver data, that's it, and it's not visible here because it's too large. So this is the main database. So every information is in there. So JSON holds the nickname, which has to be unique. That's why I was keen about having it unique, a unique part there in the list, and this unique name then holds all the information like the address, the phone number, the best time, and things like that, how many rounds someone has done, things like that. All that is in that one data. The great thing about JSON is there are cool options to import JSON files into Excel. So that is a really great thing to do. So I was able to provide this database with all these timings, daily based. So because there was a registration thing and the best time, date, and everything in that list. So I was able to provide that to my managers, and they had very easy way to find out who's daily best or who's best for overall and things like that. Yeah, that's about the variables.
There's just one last question that just came to my mind. You did have a widget running on a compact player and accessing that on the Microsoft Surface, but it's possible to run a widget on the Surface directly.
It is, yes, if you plug the dongle somehow.
Oh yeah, that's right. That could happen over a network drive, for example. There are solutions for sharing dongle licenses over network or just adapters. But in principle, you could use the Surface for running Widget Designer.
This is correct. And you also, if you don't have to use license features, of course you can use Widget on the Surface like without any dongle, right?
Exactly, the free
it's,
version.
The free version, yes. What did I say? Don't care. Sorry. Yeah.
The one without license.
No. So going back to tracking widget scripts, I can fly through that quickly if you're okay.
Yes, please.
Cool. So also this, there's one part is the node system, which we had a short look at already, and the other part is also the scripting part. So also in this widget is much scripting because the communication with the carrier track is really about scripting, and you have to always to request the Carrera track to give you data. So I had to make my mind around that. So there's the request script was a bit evil hack, more or less, and I cannot recommend to do so. It worked, but yeah, maybe there are better ways to do that. And the main thing, read message, that's the main script, which takes then the message which is coming back from the Carrera track, and this analyzes what's in that message and doing whatever is need to do depending on the message tags or the message content. So maybe we can dive into that one later. We cannot dive into everything here today. I think it's already late, sorry. And yeah, shortly over the variables there. Of course, I had to get data for each individual car. So, and there are multiple variables for each car. I changed that also one week after beginning with this project. I changed everything to different working, because what you have to do, or what you get from the Carrera track back, or also if you do your own timings, you always get a timestamp. It's not like, oh, last round time is like 5 seconds. No, it's like a timestamp. So it's a now time, and so you have to store the last time and then calculate the difference between the now time and the last time. That's one thing you have to do. And that is then the round time you get out of that. Also, I have to store the best time. And there was, I talked about that already, there was a bounding box somewhere on the track which changed a variable to true state. And also this is down here, so if the round is a valid round. That's about the main variables. Of course, there's an absolute best day and absolute best timing there, and some other variables. Yeah.
That's just one last thing. How did you manage the communication between the two widget designers? I mean, they were exchanging information.
Sure. This is based on a TCP communication. I think the remoting is the keyword, so I remoted into each one. So use the remote tool on the sending part. Or is it other way? No, it's that way, right? So I use the remote tool to send and receive it via the TCP input. So like here, so I get the message and I use that message from the other widget to share these information. Is something true? What's the best time? Please write it into the main database and things like that. Is that sufficient for you, or can I put it in another?
Well, more details would drag the webinar on for a very long while. So if you want to take a look into one of the remaining topics, we should continue. But remoting is the keyword here if anyone's interested. So what we could do now is we want to show you a bit the project more in detail, but we have 3 different options here. So we could take a look at the read message script, the message that we get back from the Carrera track. How exactly was that analyzed and evaluated? We could take a look into the tracking node system. So what exactly did the tracking do and how was that done? Or we could take a look at the registration widget and how was that JSON management done? We're now going to have a little vote. So next to your dialog in your upper right corner, you should have a little hand symbol. If you click that, then you have a raised hand. So let's try that out. Everyone, please just raise the hand so we can see that you all found the button. I see 1. Oh, that's not much.
Maybe they're
Come
not.
on, guys, you can find the little hand. 2, 3. Go on. That really is not much. Okay, so only 3 people are allowed to vote.
Okay, let's try it anyway.
Fine, yep, let's try that anyway. So, whom of you would like to hear more about the read message script, so the message evaluation? That's 1. Anyone else? 2, 3?
Oh.
Question? Okay, another one who didn't find the symbol. Okay, let's take that for 4.
Mm-hmm.
Who would like to know more about the tracking node system? 1, 2, 3, 4.
If you vote for 2 things, we only have time for 1, unfortunately. So if you vote for multiple things, it's not gonna make it.
Okay, so that's only 3. And is anyone who would like to know, wait a moment, reset. Anyone who would like to know more about the registration? That's only 2. Okay, so if nobody decides in 3, 2, 1 now, the winner is the read message script.
All right, that's cool.
Perfect.
Okay, let's dive a bit into that one. Therefore, I can change my screen a bit. So there you can see a bit more. Let's make it a bit larger. So this is actually the tracking widget. That's how it looks. Let's first drive you through how is it working. So we have a connection via Connect Manager. It's a bit small, unfortunately. So there's a serial COM connections. So it's a serial connection to the Carrera track there. It started and it's doing its thing. All right, this is serial connection number 1. And there I have a COM input node. And that input node is getting the information from COM connection ID 1. And I have an ASCII start symbol and I have an ASCII stop symbol because the Carrera protocol is providing these information. So I can, with these ASCII start and stop bits, I can make sure I read the full message which comes back. And there I can see whatever is inside those symbols. So if I send another request, let me shortly send another request, it will change. So and here on the front page you see the incoming message. That's what's in between these 2 symbols. Okay. So how did I display that there? So from that input node, it's going into the script output node. Let's try to make it as large as possible that you can see something. So I start every script, I start with a debug message to make sure. So if you run lots of scripts, it's getting a mess. So to get to stay on track what's happening with your scripts, I found it useful to put a debug message in front of every script so that I know this script is executed. So the next step is I set a local variable and I set it to a string. So I define it as a string, and this line will put the incoming message into that local variable. And then there's a debug message again with the contents of that variable. So just to make sure if this that this content is stored correctly. And the next line, this is putting the incoming message into that label here, just for display. And then at the end of that script, there I will start the read message macro, and I will provide incoming the incoming variable. So that's the content of the incoming message, and I process it at the very same time directly. So I encode it to bytes. And the second variable, and the second I also put that variable in there to provide the whole message without encoding to that macro here. So these values will be sent to that macro. Let's have a look into that macro. Read message. There we go. So starting again with the debug message, so that I know that my read message is executed. The first thing, I set a new variable. I called it decimal, incoming decimal. So, and I used the incoming encoded. That's how the first value sent from here is called in that macro. So this first thing, incoming encoded to bytes, I named it incoming encoded. So now I use that variable name here, and I put these single values into a list and make a copy out of it. That's maybe some stuff for another webinar. Why I have
actually covered that in a webinar.
Oh, you have already. That's nice to hear.
Yeah,
So which one is it?
It's the list in JSON webinar, where you can also learn a bit more about this encode and decode bytes option.
Ooh, so that's then if you are interested in that one, that's a great and useful information. You can go for Janina's webinar there. Great. So I don't have to dive into that too deep. Thanks, Janina. So the encoded thing is now in a list which is called incoming decoded. So the next thing is calculate correct value per bit. So, and there's for next, what is it called?
I'm not sure what you mean.
For next thing?
It's a for loop?
A loop.
Or
Yeah,
do you mean iteration?
a for loop. No, I want to say thank you, Janina. So the next thing is a for loop here. So I go through all the list items here. Because I'm start from null, I have to degrade it by 1. And what am I doing there? I take the value 48 down. Why am I doing this? So this is how to explain it. This value is an ASCII code, and if you go for the ASCII table, I have some here somewhere. Where was it? Where did I put it? There. So if you go for the ASCII table, you can see the decimal line and the ASCII element you want to use. And I think I had to go for the numbers. Yes, for these numbers, and they are actually at 48. So to make and the value I get there is 48, but it means 0, right? So I just put 48 down. So I just some little math there to put the encoded bytes from where is it? This value to this value. Right? Because I'm only using these values here, so I'm only interested in numbers, and that's why I made this little step here. Okay, get rid of that. So the next thing then, and now it's getting interesting. So I have now encoded this to decimal numbers, which I can directly read. So the message which comes out, so I can show you the message shortly, is, for example, that one. That's a status thing. And if a car crosses the finish line, let me show you that shortly. Maybe you can see it here. So
everyone who has switched off webcam images, now it's the time to re-implement the webcam images because Thomas is showing something.
Yes, the race car. So it crossed the line. Maybe you heard a little beep, and when I ask for the message again, now you can see that there is a different message there, and it starts with a 3. Let's keep that in mind. So 3 at the start means it's car number 3. Use car number 3 in this time. But what am I doing next? So I created a switch case, and taking that that list. So all the elements are single decimal numbers in a list. So, and I'm looking for that list for the first entry only. So, which means it's only the first letter here, or the first number. It's only numbers. So I'm looking for the first number, and I look if the case is 1. So if there's a 1 in, do that. If there's a 2, do that, and so on. Right? So up to 10. So if it's a car, actually it's 3. We didn't use car number 3 on ISE, so in between it was used differently. So there's the 3 now. But we can imagine it was just car number 1. Or let's say number 2, it's not the Christie car, that's a bit different. So what I do there is I set all the timestamp variables. So that's a timestamp workflow. So green last is green now, green now gets a new time. So the last now time, the now time is getting the last time, and there's a new now time, and the now time will be created with this little script here. So this will call another script, and this will then, the script will get this data with it, and this is, no, this is incoming decimal, this is from here. So this is again this, this variable. And decode time will do some decoding for the message which comes behind that number. So these numbers, this is a code developed by Carrera, and it's a bit tricky to figure out how it works because they did some encryption on that, and I had to get the help from our developers to figure out how it works. They were able to help me, so I was able to read that message and get the timestamp correctly from the Carrera track. So that's what's in it. So this is just getting me back. So this is a function, not a macro. So there comes the value back, which is then the actual timestamp. So green now gets the actual timestamp from Carrera. So next then is calculating the round time. That's this one. So now minus last will be then the new time. And then I just have to check, is this a new best time? And that's this part for if. And there are some conditions now. Current best greater means current best. What was current best? Current best. So if so that means if the time is better than the current best, or current best is 0, right? So if it's 0, so if you are the first participant, the timing is 0, so that's then valid. Or if you're faster than the current best time, that's the first condition. And then we have an AND. So all these conditions have to be true to make this script possible. So what else do we have? Race stopped, false. So the race is still going on. The timing has to be more than 2000 milliseconds. So everything what's below 2 seconds, I just said, no, it's not possible, not valid. And then we have this one here. So this is the variable I'm getting from my tracking system. And this, so when the car passes a certain area and hitting the bounding box, this will be set to true. And if all these conditions are true, then I set a new best time. And little fancy animation on Pandora's box and check best time. This will then put this new time into the database. And that's the run for one case here. So whenever there's such a number, it will run that case. But there are some special cases, like if I get the status now, you will get this one. And this is, you can go for the ASCII table again. This is case 10 here. So this is a 10 in decimal. And for case 10, this is a state thing. It's telling me different things about how much fuel is used if you use that feature, what's the pace car thing, and things like that is in there. But there's also a state in which gives me feedback about the race state. So as you can see, if I press Rennstart, so start race in English, sorry for that, it will initiate and I have to get sent. So that's my script who's pulling polling the request again and again and again and again. So I'm constantly getting new information on that here. So this is now different here. So that's case 10 again. And in case 10, I'm now looking for the message. So that's the whole message I'm getting here to string, to use it as a string, to be able to use these members here to just go for this part for this number here, because this is the state I want to read. And there, for this, I put that into that variable. And now I start a second switch case inside case 10, and I'm looking for these states, and I get like 0 is race, 1 is grid, right? So I'm getting a 1, so that's a grid state. And then if I press start now, that's the red button, it will read all these different states and things will happen there. Also, if I press too early and make a false start, this is also recognized here. Right? So this is the second switch case inside the switch case, and that's how it works. And if the car passes, you will get the timings. All right. I think that was it.
Oh, just one little question added.
Sure.
So what you did say was that the Carrera track doesn't send out any kind of information on its own, so you always have to request it. There's two different possibilities to do this, so which is either just asking periodically every couple of seconds or milliseconds, or having a trigger on a request. What did you do?
I used a periodic system to do that. So because to find, you have to figure out what trigger can I use. And of course I can use a car as a trigger, so to make sure when the car passes the line, I can use that as trigger. Also with the tracking system, so the cars were tracked, so it was possible to use that. But what I just showed here with the start race and these statey, no car is moving at all. So I don't have any trigger to use. So, and I want to make sure that this is really accurate. So I poll this request very frequently, multiple times a second. I think, I'm not sure, I think 10 times a second or something like that. I'm asking about this state. So as you can see here, if let's start the race again. And you can see the length, how long the message is displayed there. When I cross the line with the car, you can see how, so the next poll is already going on very quickly, right? So that's also the reason I mentioned before, to have much performance on that system, because it's polling very much, yeah, to be the most accurate I can on that part.
Okay, great explanation. Thank you.
Great. Any more questions so far?
We have answered everything that came up.
That's
I think
great.
we're good for today.
Cool. I really like it. Thank you, Janina, for helping me coming through that, and for your nice ideas in between programming. I really appreciate it.
We're all having fun.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, hope to see you next time. Thank you guys for listening, and girls and whoever. And yeah, see you next time.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.